I always thought my life was simple, happy, and built on trust. My husband, Ryan, and I met in our late 20s, and after 2 years of dating, we tied the knot. It wasn't a grand fairy tale, but it was real. We built a home, a life, and most importantly, we had our son, Leo. Leo is 5 now, full of energy, and the absolute light of our lives. Every morning, he runs into our room with the biggest smile, ready to take on the world. I thought nothing could shake the happiness we had. But as it turns out, some people just can't stand to see others happy. Enter my sister-in-law, Vanessa. From the moment I met her, there was tension. At first, I thought it was just the typical awkwardness that comes with new family dynamics. But over time, I realized it was more than that. She didn't like me. No reason, no justification, she just didn't. At her wedding, she turned what should have been her special day into a dramatic mess, accusing me of trying to overshadow her just because I wore a cream-colored dress, one she had chosen for all her bridesmaids. It was little things like that, over and over, for years. Backhanded compliments, snide remarks, finding a way to make any of my happy moments feel small compared to hers. But the worst came last Christmas. Vanessa arrived at our family gathering with a smug smile and a carefully wrapped present for Leo. When he tore it open, I froze. It was a DNA test kit. At first, I brushed it off. Leo loves science, and he's always been curious about family history, so I figured maybe she was just being thoughtful. But then I caught the look on her face, the way she glanced at Ryan, the way her smile curled just enough to be sinister. That night, Ryan pulled me aside. His face was tight with something that looked like anger, or maybe something worse. "She said something weird to me earlier," he muttered. "Something about how the truth always comes out." A chill ran down my spine. It wasn't the first time Vanessa had made little digs about Leo's appearance. Unlike Ryan and me, who both have dark hair and brown eyes, Leo has light brown curls and green eyes. Of course, genetics aren't always straightforward, but I had heard the whispers, the little comments, the passive-aggressive jokes, and now, Vanessa had found a way to plant a real seed of doubt. Ryan and I didn't fight often, but that night, things got tense. He said he wasn't accusing me of anything, but the fact that he even entertained the possibility made me furious. "You're seriously letting Vanessa get into your head like this?" I snapped. "You know she's been trying to undermine me for years." "I know," Ryan sighed, running a hand down his face. "But don't you think it's better to just take the test and shut her up for good?" I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him it was ridiculous. But deep down, I was scared. Not because I had anything to hide, because I didn't, but because I knew if we let this test dictate our marriage, we were letting Vanessa win. So we agreed. Leo would take the test. We told him it was just for fun, something to learn about his ancestors. He was thrilled, completely unaware of the real reason behind it. But then something unexpected happened. Vanessa's son, Ethan, who was 14, saw what was going on and wanted to take a DNA test too. "Sounds fun," Ethan said. "I want to see where I'm from too." Vanessa's husband, Mark, thought it was a great idea. He ordered a kit for Ethan without a second thought. At the time, I didn't think much of it. But looking back, I realized that was the moment everything started to unravel. A few weeks later, the results came in. Leo's test was exactly what we knew it would be. Ryan was his father. No question, no doubt, no drama. Vanessa had nothing to gloat about, but just when I thought I could finally breathe again, Ethan's results arrived. And that's when everything exploded. Mark wasn't Ethan's biological father. The moment that revelation came out, the air in the room changed. Vanessa turned pale. Mark went completely silent. The rest of the family sat there, stunned, as if we had all just been hit by a truck. Nobody knew what to say. But I knew one thing for sure: Vanessa had spent years trying to plant doubt in my marriage. But in the end, it was her own lies that were about to tear her world apart. And this was only the beginning. The room was dead silent, the kind of silence that stretches so thick it feels suffocating. Mark just stared at the paper in his hands. His jaw clenched so tight I thought his teeth might shatter. Vanessa, usually so smug and full of snide remarks, looked like she had forgotten how to breathe. I wasn't sure what to do. What do you even say in a moment like that? Ethan was the first to break the silence. "Wait, what does this mean?" He was looking around the room, confused, waiting for anyone to explain. But nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Then Mark stood up so fast his chair screeched against the floor. Without a word, he walked out. The front door slammed behind him, the force rattling the windows. Vanessa shot up from her seat, panic flashing in her eyes. "Mark," she called, running after him, but he was already gone. And just like that, the family gathering that was supposed to be a simple Christmas celebration turned into a disaster of epic proportions. I turned to Ryan, who was still gripping Leo's DNA results in his hands. Our test had come back exactly as expected. Leo was his, no doubt about it. But that didn't even feel important anymore. Vanessa had spent years throwing shade at me, trying to stir up drama in my marriage. And now, in some twisted, ironic turn of fate, her own marriage was the one imploding. Ethan was still sitting at the table, staring at the DNA results in front of him like they might burst into flames. He looked up at me, his voice small. "So, if my dad isn't my dad, then who is?" My heart broke a little for him. Vanessa had lied to everyone, but the person she had betrayed the most was sitting right in front of me, his whole world crumbling. Before I could even think of something to say, Vanessa stormed back inside. Her face was red, her breathing heavy. "I need to go," she muttered, grabbing her purse and practically yanking Ethan out of his seat. "Mom, wait." "Not now, Ethan," she snapped. "We'll talk about this at home." And just like that, they were gone. I exhaled, slumping into my chair. Well, that was insane. Ryan let out a hollow laugh. No kidding. He rubbed his temple like he was trying to process everything. "Do you think Mark's coming back?" I shrugged. If I were him, I wouldn't. Ryan didn't argue. For the next few days, the entire family was buzzing with gossip. Nobody knew what was happening between Vanessa and Mark, but the tension was thick. My mother-in-law called me at least 3 times a day, trying to get details, but honestly, I knew just as much as she did. Then, a week later, Mark showed up at our house. Ryan answered the door, surprised to see him. Mark, he looked awful, like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were bloodshot, his face hollow, his usually neat hair a mess. "Hey man," Mark muttered. "Can I come in?" Ryan stepped aside and I immediately got up from the couch. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I knew whatever was coming wasn't going to be good. Mark collapsed onto the couch with a deep sigh. I don't even know where to start. Ryan and I sat across from him, waiting. "I moved out," he finally said. "Haven't been home since that night." He ran a hand down his face. I can't even look at her. I didn't blame him. I wouldn't be able to either. "What did she say?" Ryan asked carefully. Mark let out a bitter laugh. "Lied, of course. Said there must have been a mix-up with the test. That maybe there was a lab error." He scoffed. "But I'm not an idiot. I knew something was off for a long time. I just didn't want to believe it." I shifted in my seat. "Are you going to take another test?" "I already did," he admitted. "Took a medical grade one this time. No room for mistakes." "And?" Ryan asked, though I could tell he already knew the answer. Mark just shook his head. "Ethan isn't mine. Neither is Olivia." My stomach dropped. Their daughter, Olivia, was only 7. Ryan swore under his breath. "Jesus, Mark." Mark leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I've been a dad for 14 years. 14 years, and none of it was real." His voice cracked. "I don't even know who I am anymore." I didn't know what to say. There was nothing that could fix this, nothing that could make it better. "She begged me to stay," he muttered. "Said it didn't change anything. That I'm still their dad." He scoffed. "Like it's that simple." I hesitated. "What about Ethan and Olivia?" Mark sighed. "That's the worst part. I love those kids. No matter what, they'll always be mine. But I don't know if I can live in the same house as her anymore." He looked up at us, his expression raw. "Would you?" Ryan and I exchanged a glance. "No," Ryan admitted. "I don't think I could." Mark nodded slowly, like he'd already known the answer. "I'm filing for divorce." There it was. The moment everything became final. Vanessa's entire life, the one she had worked so hard to craft into the perfect image, was shattering piece by piece. And honestly, I couldn't even bring myself to feel bad for her. But the real victims here were Ethan and Olivia. They didn't ask for this. They didn't deserve to have their entire world turned upside down. And I had a sinking feeling that the worst was yet to come. For the first few days after Mark's visit, things felt off. It was like we were all waiting for something to happen. Vanessa had gone silent. No dramatic phone calls, no texts, no social media meltdowns, nothing. Honestly, that made me more nervous. Vanessa wasn't the type to go down quietly. She thrived on control, on always having the upper hand. But right now, she had lost everything: her marriage, her carefully curated image, and soon, maybe even her kids. Mark stayed in a hotel for a while, trying to wrap his head around things. He wanted to be there for Ethan and Olivia, but he couldn't bring himself to go back to that house. I couldn't blame him. Ryan and I did our best to stay out of it, but it was impossible. The entire family was talking about it. Every conversation with my mother-in-law turned into an interrogation. "Have you spoken to Vanessa?" she asked me for the 100th time. "No," I sighed, balancing my phone between my shoulder and ear while making Leo's lunch. "She's ignoring me. I just don't understand how this happened," she muttered. "Do you think Mark is making a mistake leaving her?" I nearly dropped the knife I was using to cut fruit. "Are you serious?" I asked. She cheated on him twice, lied for over a decade. You think he should just get over it? Well, no, but the kids. I sighed. That was the real issue. Ethan and Olivia. They were stuck in the middle of this mess, caught between a father who loved them but didn't know how to stay, and a mother who had built their lives on a lie. And things were only going to get worse. A few days later, Ryan got a text from Mark. "Mark, need to talk. Can I stop by?" We both knew this wasn't going to be a casual visit. When he arrived, he looked even worse than before. Dark circles under his eyes, his clothes wrinkled like he hadn't bothered to change in days. He was exhausted. "I filed for full custody," he said the second he sat down. Ryan and I exchanged a look. "Full?" Ryan asked. "You're not even trying for joint?" Mark shook his head. "Not after what Vanessa pulled." A sinking feeling settled in my stomach. What did she do? He let out a bitter laugh. "Told Ethan I'm not his heir, Dad. Said I was leaving because I never loved him in the first place." I gasped. "She wouldn't." "She did," Mark muttered, rubbing his temples. "Came home from school crying. Asked me why I hated him. That did it. That was the moment my last shred of sympathy for Vanessa vanished." Ryan clenched his jaw. "She's weaponizing the kids." Mark nodded. "She doesn't care about what's best for them. She just wants to hurt me." I could feel the anger bubbling inside me. Vanessa had always been selfish, but this was evil. "She's losing control," I said, "and she's lashing out the only way she knows how." Mark ran a hand through his hair. "I don't want to take the kids from her completely. I don't want to be that guy, but I won't let her screw them up like this." I nodded. "You're doing the right thing." Mark let out a shaky breath. "I hope so." That night, I couldn't stop thinking about Ethan. He and Leo had always been close. Ethan was the big brother figure Leo adored, always patient, always kind. Now, he was trapped in the middle of a war he never asked for. I decided to call Vanessa. She didn't answer. Fine. If she wanted to ignore me, I'd go to her house myself. Ryan tried to talk me out of it. "She's unpredictable right now." "I don't care," I shot back. "Someone needs to talk some sense into her." So, I drove to Vanessa's. Her car was in the driveway, but it took her way too long to answer the door. When she finally did, I barely recognized her. Her usually perfect blonde hair was a mess, her face pale, eyes swollen. She looked defeated. "What do you want?" she mumbled. I took a deep breath. "To talk." She let out a bitter laugh. "Talk? You've been enjoying this, haven't you?" I blinked. "What?" "Watching my life fall apart," she muttered, stepping back to let me inside. "I bet it's been fun for you." I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. Classic Vanessa. Even at rock bottom, she still thought she was the victim. "You're the one who started this," I said, keeping my voice calm. "You brought this on yourself." Her expression hardened. "And yet somehow, I'm the only one suffering." I folded my arms. "Really?" "Because from where I'm standing, Ethan and Olivia are the ones suffering the most." That got her attention. She looked away, guilt flickering across her face. I pressed on. "Ethan thinks Mark doesn't love him anymore. You did that. Not Mark. Not me. You." Tears welled in her eyes. I panicked. He was leaving. I didn't know what to do. "So, you decided to destroy your son instead?" Vanessa sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. I screwed up. No kidding. For the first time in years, I saw the real Vanessa, the one underneath the arrogance and manipulation. She was broken, but I couldn't afford to feel sorry for her. Not when her actions were hurting innocent kids. I sighed. "Mark's going for full custody." Her head shot up. "What? What did you expect?" I asked. You're trying to turn your son against his father." Her lip trembled. "I can't lose them." "Then stop fighting like this is about you." She wiped her eyes. "What do I do?" For the first time, she sounded genuinely lost. I softened. "Fix what you broke." She nodded slowly, but I wasn't sure if she would. As I left, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Vanessa might have been down, but she wasn't out. And I had a bad feeling she was about to make things even worse. I drove home with a pit in my stomach. For the first time, Vanessa had dropped the act. She wasn't smug. She wasn't scheming. She was lost. But that didn't mean I trusted her. People like Vanessa didn't just change overnight. When I walked through the front door, Ryan was waiting for me. His arms were crossed, worry clear on his face. "Well?" he asked. I sighed, dropping my purse onto the table. "She knows she messed up." Ryan raised an eyebrow. "And?" I hesitated. "I think she's scared. But I don't know if that means she'll do the right thing." Ryan ran a hand down his face. "We should stay out of this." I laughed dryly. "Ryan, we're already in it." He didn't argue. Because we both knew the truth, whether we liked it or not. Vanessa had pulled us into her mess. And there was no backing out now. And sure enough, 2 days later, things exploded again. It was a Sunday morning. We were just sitting down for breakfast when Ryan's phone rang. It was Mark. Ryan put it on speaker. "Hey man, what's up?" Mark's voice came through, sharp and angry. "Vanessa took the kids. I nearly knocked over my coffee." "What?" She packed up their things and left. "I don't know where she went." Ryan sat up straight. "Did she say anything?" "Just some nonsense about protecting them." Mark's breathing was heavy, like he had been running. "I swear to God, if she tries to leave the state, I cut in." "Mark, breathe. Have you called the police?" "Of course I have," he snapped. "But they said there's nothing they can do yet because she still has custody." My stomach twisted. "Oh my God. She's trying to take them away from me," Mark muttered, voice raw. "I knew she'd do something, but I didn't think she'd go this far." Ryan clenched his jaw. "We'll help you find them," Mark sighed. "I don't even know where to start." I took a deep breath, thinking. Vanessa was impulsive, but she wasn't stupid. If she wanted to run, she wouldn't go somewhere obvious. Then it hit me. "She might be at her parents' cabin," I blurted. Mark paused. "The one up north?" I nodded. "She used to go there when she was overwhelmed. She always said it was her escape." Ryan grabbed his keys. "Then let's go." The drive to the cabin was tense. Mark followed behind us in his car, and I kept glancing at the rearview mirror, worried about what we'd find when we got there. It took 2 hours, but as soon as we pulled up the long gravel driveway, we spotted Vanessa's car. Mark barely put his car in park before jumping out. I followed, my heart pounding. The cabin was quiet, tucked away in the trees, but I could see movement inside. Vanessa was pacing. Ethan and Olivia sat on the couch, their faces pale and confused. Mark banged on the door. "Vanessa, open up." She jumped, whipping around to look at us through the window. For a second, I saw something flicker across her face, fear maybe, or guilt. Then she straightened and walked to the door. She opened it, just a crack. "You need to leave." Mark's voice was dangerously calm. "Vanessa, give me my kids. They're my kids too," she snapped. I stepped forward. "Vanessa, what are you doing?" She let out a sharp laugh. "I'm protecting them." "From what?" Mark's voice cracked. "Me." She looked away. "You were going to take them from me." Mark exhaled slowly. "I wasn't trying to take them from you. I was trying to protect them from your lies." Vanessa's face twisted. "You don't understand." "Then explain it to me," Mark pleaded. For a moment she wavered. Then Olivia spoke, her small voice breaking the tension. "Mom, I want to go home." Vanessa flinched. Ethan stood up, his expression cold. "Me too." That was it. Vanessa deflated, her shoulders sagging. I didn't want to lose everything." Mark softened, just a little. "You already did, Vanessa. This wasn't the way to fix it." She hesitated. Then, slowly, she stepped aside. Mark rushed inside, pulling his kids into his arms. Olivia clung to him, burying her face in his chest. Ethan didn't cry, but his hands were shaking as he held on to his dad. Vanessa just stood there, staring at them like she was realizing, too late, that she had lost. Ryan put a hand on my back and I exhaled. "It's over," I whispered, but I knew that wasn't true, because Vanessa was still Vanessa, and something told me she wasn't done yet. The ride back from the cabin was tense. Vanessa stayed behind, refusing to even look at Mark as he packed the kids into his car. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stood there, hollow and silent, watching her world slip away. It should have felt like the end of all this, the moment where everything settled, but deep down I knew better. Vanessa wasn't the type to go down without a fight, and I was right, because 2 days later she did something none of us saw coming. Mark had just gotten the kids settled back at home when his lawyer called. Vanessa had filed for emergency custody. Her claim? That Mark was unstable and dangerous, citing the incident where he confronted the man she had an affair with, the one that got him arrested. "She's trying to use that against me," Mark said, pacing in my living room, his fists clenched at his sides. "She's acting like I'm a threat to the kids, like I'm some kind of violent psycho." Ryan swore under his breath. This is low, even for her. I felt my stomach twist. I should have seen this coming. When Vanessa realized she had lost control, of course, she was going to try and take it back. Mark ran a hand down his face. "My lawyer says it probably won't hold up. But still, this could drag out for months." I exhaled, trying to think. What's her endgame? She knows the truth is out. She knows she lied, that she cheated. So why is she still fighting? Mark let out a bitter laugh. Because she doesn't know how to lose. And that was the scariest part. Vanessa had nothing left but her pride, and pride was a dangerous thing. A few days later, we got more bad news. Mark's lawyer called again. "She's refusing to cooperate with custody mediation," he said. "She wants full custody." Mark was furious. How does she think this is going to work? The kids don't even want to be with her full time. And that was true. Ethan had barely spoken to Vanessa since the cabin incident, and Olivia clung to Mark like she was afraid he'd disappear if she let go. But none of that mattered in court. Vanessa knew how to play the game. She was painting herself as the victim, the heartbroken mother abandoned by a husband who never loved her. And she was throwing everything she had at Mark to make sure she came out on top. "She's delusional," I muttered after Mark left. Ryan nodded grimly. "Yeah, but she's also desperate. And desperate people do reckless things." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Ethan and Olivia. They were the real victims in all of this. They had been raised by a man who loved them, only to find out that their entire childhood had been built on lies. And now, instead of trying to make it right, Vanessa was making it worse. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Vanessa. "Vanessa, you did this. You turned everyone against me." I stared at the screen, my hands tightening around my phone. She was unraveling. I took a deep breath before replying. "Me? No, Vanessa. You did this to yourself." She didn't respond. But I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. The next morning, we got another call. Vanessa had hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on Mark. Ryan nearly dropped his coffee. "She what?" Mark was fuming. "She's trying to prove I'm an unfit father." He scoffed. "What's she gonna find? My Netflix history?" But I wasn't laughing, because Vanessa was grasping at straws. And when people grasp at straws, they don't care who they hurt in the process. Ryan shook his head. "She's spiraling." Mark ran a hand through his hair. "Yeah, and I have no idea how to stop her." I swallowed hard. "What if you can't?" Mark didn't answer, because we all knew the truth. The only person who could stop Vanessa was Vanessa herself. And right now, she wasn't ready to let go. Vanessa had officially lost it. The private investigator, the emergency custody filing, the non-stop manipulation. She wasn't just fighting for control anymore, she was burning every bridge she had left. Mark was exhausted. The kids were drained. And honestly, I was done. But even with everything unraveling, Vanessa refused to back down. And then, just when we thought things couldn't get worse, she made one last desperate move. It happened on a Friday afternoon. Mark had just picked up Ethan and Olivia from school when his phone rang. It was his lawyer. "She filed a restraining order against you." I was in the kitchen when he called Ryan and me over, his voice shaking with rage. "She's trying to get me barred from seeing my own kids." Ryan swore. "On what grounds?" Mark's jaw was tight. "She's claiming I'm a dangerous presence, that I've created an unsafe environment for them." I clenched my fists. "That's a lie. Everyone knows that's a lie." Mark nodded. "Yeah, but if the judge takes her seriously, this could drag on for months." And that was exactly what Vanessa wanted. She couldn't win, so she was trying to stall, trying to keep her grip on the kids for as long as possible. It was disgusting. Ryan exhaled sharply. "What do we do?" Mark's face was unreadable. "I fight." And that's what he did. The hearing was set for 2 weeks later. Vanessa walked into the courtroom like she was stepping onto a stage head high, tears ready to fall. She painted herself as the victim, sobbing about how Mark had abandoned her, how he had turned the kids against her. But Mark, he didn't fight dirty. He didn't twist the truth. He just told the judge everything about the affair, about the DNA tests, about how Vanessa had tried to run away with the kids when she realized she was losing. His lawyer presented texts, emails, statements from family members, including Ethan's own words, saying he didn't want to live with his mother full-time. It was brutal. And when it was Vanessa's turn to speak again, she cracked. The carefully constructed victim act shattered. She lashed out at Mark, at the judge, even at her own lawyer. She screamed about how none of this was fair, about how she was the one who had been wronged. By the time she was done, she wasn't crying anymore. She was just empty. And that was the moment I realized Vanessa had finally lost everything. The judge ruled in Mark's favor, full custody. Vanessa would get visitation, but only under strict conditions. No manipulations, no running, no more games. When the decision was read, she just sat there, staring at the floor. No tears, no protests, just silence. She didn't even look at Mark, or Ethan, or Olivia. And for the first time, I felt something I never thought I'd feel toward Vanessa: pity. Not because she didn't deserve what happened, she did. She made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. But because, in her obsession with winning, she had lost the one thing that actually mattered: her family. That night, Mark came over. Ryan and I sat with him in the backyard, the weight of everything finally settling in. "It's over," Mark said, exhaling. "It's really over." Ryan clapped him on the shoulder. "You did what you had to do." Mark nodded. "Yeah, but it still sucks." I understood what he meant. No matter how much Vanessa had hurt him, no matter how much damage she had done, this wasn't the ending anyone wanted. But at least now, the kids had a chance at healing. That was the most important thing. Weeks passed, then months. Vanessa faded into the background, her presence shrinking into something distant, like an old, painful memory. Ethan and Olivia started smiling again, laughing, living. Mark? He was finally free. And as for me, I had spent years dealing with Vanessa's cruelty, her schemes, her constant attempts to tear me down. But in the end, she destroyed herself instead. And honestly, that was justice enough. Story 2. Instead of addressing her at work, I spent months preparing my exit after discovering texts between my girlfriend and her AP. I simply left her a letter after moving everything out. Reddit, hello, long-time lurker, poster for the first time. I've been reading tales on here for a long, and frankly, I never thought I'd have one of my own to contribute. I'm still making an effort to process. I suppose I'm seeking a different viewpoint, some approval, or simply a space to express my emotions. It will be long. First of all, I'm 35 years old, and for a while I was beginning to believe that finding a decent, honest lady was like trying to locate a unicorn. You never see one, but you hear about them. I'm not the kind of polite person who gripes about being in the buddy zone. I'm a rather direct, no-nonsense individual. I work in construction. I'm competent at my job and I make nice money. However, I always felt that even if I was giving it my all in my previous relationships, it wasn't enough. I was the one who delivered flowers without cause and remembered anniversaries, listened, paid close attention to what they had to say. I made an effort to be empathetic and helpful, but it always seemed to end with me being wounded. It got to the point where I began to think that perhaps all the hard work and all the positive things were no longer important. Being a kind, compassionate person seemed more like a burden than a strength. I was becoming very pessimistic about the entire relationship situation. I honestly believed that virtues were no longer prized. To be honest, I wasn't looking. Then I met Jessica around 5 years ago. At the time, she was 33. There was nothing spectacular or charming about it. We met at a casual gathering through a mutual acquaintance. I recall being attracted to her grin, even though it was so matter-of-fact. It wasn't forced or false. It was real. After spending a significant portion of the evening conversing with her, I obtained her number, and we began dating around 3 months later. In the early days, there was a great deal of eagerness to see one another. We clicked so well. I always made sure to give everything my best effort. I can still clearly recall the day, even down to our outfits. I initially believed the connection to be a pretty casual affair, but eventually I began to feel something for it. This was my opportunity. And I thought I had found the one there for a time. Jessica was unique. We had many interests, such as hiking and exploring new eateries. However, I felt that it was beneficial for us to have our own distinct hobbies. I enjoy refurbishing vintage vehicles, things like going to shows. I didn't mind that she thought it was kind of intriguing. She made a variety of bowls and vases since she was a huge pottery enthusiast. Even though I lacked the patience to create her artwork myself, I still found it to be admirable. It provided us with topics for discussion and opportunities for mutual learning. In those early days, everything appeared to fall into place. We were both pretty young, still figuring things out, but we were doing it together. It felt natural. We had the impression that we were actually creating something. At this point, we were discussing the future, planning, and other things. The fact that our occupations were so dissimilar contributes to this tale. Afterwards, I work in construction, as I indicated. On most days, I work physically on site. Although it's challenging, my work is honest, and I take pride in it. Jessica, however, was a salesperson. Her success was evaluated based on the amount of software she sold. She worked in an office from 9 to 5 at first, but she quickly embraced her company's work from home option when it became available. I initially thought it was fantastic. More freedom for her. Even if it was simply living in the same house while she worked, we might be able to spend more time together. I constantly encouraged her to finish her work so she could earn that promotion, and I was always really proud of her. We had destinations in mind. Let me tell you the truth. I've always thought of myself as an excellent spouse. I'm not boasting, but I make an effort to give my partner my whole attention, support, and protection. This entails being impulsive, providing emotional support, and, yes, being competent in the bedroom. I worked hard with Jessica. She seemed like someone I could truly trust. I had persistent reservations about previous partners. There were hints that perhaps they weren't telling the truth. It was different with Jessica, though. I'm not arguing that adultery is impossible, but I wasn't very concerned about it. I sincerely thought that we shared a unique bond based on respect and trust. That's why I was so affected by what transpired subsequently. It began gently. Jessica began to behave strangely. It's difficult to put into words, yet she appeared strange. She was using her phone more covertly, I observed, concealing the screen as I passed, answering phones in a separate room. She showed less interest in spending time with him and was less loving. She said that she was really exhausted, even on the weekends when we often planned. I initially dismissed it. I assumed she was under stress at work. She had been working very hard to get promoted, and I could tell that the strain was wearing on her. I reminded myself often to avoid making hasty judgments. Probably nothing. I wanted so badly to think it was nothing. I didn't want to believe it was a severe situation. My first thought was merely curiosity. I wanted to know why she appeared so aloof and what was going on with her. By now, I had lost any sense of the wider picture. However, the strange behavior persisted. For a whole week, there were very few hints of the Jessica I knew. The suspicion was beginning to develop, but those few moments of normalcy were enough to keep me wondering whether I was exaggerating. I didn't believe she was cheating right away. Even at that point, I figured she could be going through a personal issue. Perhaps she was concealing a medical issue, that kind of thing. We were watching a movie one evening. We frequently did this on Saturday evenings. She seems very preoccupied, continued to check her phone. She told me it was work when I questioned her about it. Saturday night, emails. Even she had never done it before. I became pretty worried at that point. My anxiety was gradually increasing. In the end, I discussed it with my friend James. Although James is a kind man, he can be a little pessimistic, particularly when it comes to relationships. A few years before, he had gone through a really difficult divorce, which somewhat tainted his perspective on things. He simply chuckled when I told him what was happening and confided in him. "And I'll never forget this dude," he continued. "She can cheat on you if she's a woman. No matter how much you do for her or how excellent you are, it makes no difference. Every one of them have it." He went so far as to say that you could have everything: fantastic work, gorgeous appearance. However, you could never be certain. Even though it was harsh, I was really affected by the comment. It completely changed the way I saw things. All at once, everything. Jessica did appear dubious. My curiosity and anxiety turned into a strong suspicion that she was having an affair. I was unable to forget what James had said. I made the decision that I could stand it no longer. I refused to live with this persistent uncertainty, this sense that something was amiss. I resolved to get the truth about what was actually happening. I was aware of Reddit, and every piece of internet advice I came across advised checking the phone. Therefore, if circumstances didn't improve, I would choose that path. So I made a delicious meal. We used to make lasagna together when things were going well, and I prepared her favorite dish in an effort to create a calm, cozy ambiance. I even placed candles on the table. I wanted her to feel comfortable enough to confide in me. After we finished our meal, I brought it up after waiting for her to return home. I informed her that I needed to know what was going on because I was concerned about her, and that she had been acting strangely. I then asked her a direct question. "Are you unfaithful to me?" She had a startled expression. She was unable to look me in the eye as her hands began to shake. She strained to find the right words and stammered. To be honest, it hurt to watch. At last, she denied it. She expressed her surprise that I would even ask her that question, that she cherished me, that we had spent 5 years together. She started crying, almost uncontrollably. It was an entire show. Here's the problem, though. I didn't think she was real. Perhaps James's words were echoing in my head. Perhaps it was my intuition. However, something didn't feel right. I thought she would be upset. I'm furious that I would make such a charge against her. However, she wasn't. She appeared more disheartened, as if she was simply upset that I had ever considered it. She also accepted my apologies far too quickly. I apologized for blaming her at that point. It simply didn't make sense. I felt compelled to do something that I'm not proud of. I acted as though I believed her. I apologized once more. I told her that I was simply being suspicious. We then retired to our beds. I couldn't sleep, though. I made a calculated move with this. I was aware that I needed her to believe I trusted her once more in order to uncover the truth. I needed her to down her defenses. I had to wait for the appropriate time, but I knew what I was going to do. The night was going to be long. All of this was leading up to what I felt I needed to do. Until I understood the true situation, I would not be at ease. If she thinks I'm this dumb, I reasoned, she's in for another surprise. I could feel the doubt steadily eating away at me. I held off until I was certain Jessica was asleep, approximately 3:17 a.m., based on my phone. Hours have passed while I lay there, gazing at the ceiling. Even though I felt sick to my stomach and my heart was racing, I knew I had to do it. I took her phone from the nightstand, cautiously slipped out of bed, and entered the restroom. I began browsing through her texts after opening them. I started by scrolling through her gallery. Nothing. I discovered it when I went to her messages. One of the contacts is Harry's Plumbing. What is the reason for Jessica's constant messaging of a plumber? I recognized the false name right away. A cover. It was so childish, so blatant. I nearly laughed. My entire life fell apart as I clicked on the discussion. Ethan was the sender of the texts, and they contained explicit, obese names. They talked about how much they missed one another, shared intimate details, and even showed out some nearly naked photos. Among other things, I can't stop thinking about your grin. Ethan's winking look, and Jessica's response that it's difficult to concentrate on work. Even a photo of Jessica wearing some new underwear she had purchased was sent, along with the words, "I wish you were here to take this off me." Everything was in black and white. The suggestive signals and the emotional connection were there, even though they hadn't said that they had slept together yet. Simply put, it was an affair. Additionally, it had persisted for at least 2 weeks, which coincided exactly with the onset of her odd behavior. I thought I could have a panic attack as I sat on the restroom floor reading those notes. My heart was pounding. I was breathing too quickly. I could hardly hold the phone because my hands were trembling so much. I wanted to wake her up, yell, break something, and face her at that very moment. I even considered looking for this Ethan man, but I won't go into specifics because they weren't attractive. I was devastated, heartbroken, in a state of simultaneous rage. 5 years. 5 years. It was all a deception, and I had invested in this romance. I kept asking myself, how could she have done this? Did any of it happen? Was I ever truly loved by her? My entire universe seemed to have been upended. I was rather relieved to have learned about it before we were married or had children. However, I was also furious with her for how she had done it. The silly emoticons, the ridiculous code names, everything. I felt as like I was losing control and my sanity was eroding. I knew I had to leave that place. I needed to take a breath. It was time to decide what to do next. I documented everything over the following hour. After documenting everything, I made sure I had everything recorded by taking notes and screenshots. I needed to come up with a strategy. I took a seat on the restroom floor and started to consider everything. I didn't know what to do. My mind was racing with ideas. I was furious. I thought of a lot of possibilities. All of our parents are informed by the loud and visible alternatives. Distribute flyers at her place of employment or post everything online for public viewing. Without a word, the silent possibilities go. Speak with an attorney or simply leave. I wanted her to know how hurt she had made me. I became aware that I was in a powerful position. I have excellent financial stability. I have all the security that comes with being a member of a union. Jessica, however, was having difficulties. She wasn't cut out for sales. She was earning very little money. I was aware that I was the one facilitating her living in the pricey city where we both resided. Without my money, she would have trouble. I got some ideas from this. I was aware of one thing. Without her, I could manage just fine. That's where I am now. Reddit. I'm a complete wreck. I'm in pain. I'm upset. I'm also trying to think of what I should do next. I'm not sure how to end things, but I know I must. One update. Several months have passed since my previous post, and a lot has transpired. I apologize for the wait. I know a lot of you were anticipating an update. To clear my thoughts and be sure I was making the proper choices, I needed some time. Ensuring this will be a clean divide was my goal. After I learned of the affair, the first few weeks were terrible. Jessica found me cold and aloof. We were in different rooms sleeping. I didn't talk to her much. When I did, it consisted of few lines and snippets. I was so angry and disgusted with her that I couldn't even look at her. I hardly heard anything at all. I simply did not understand what she was doing. During this period, I came to the realization that it's crucial to take your time getting married, and I want to share this with all of you. I'm quite happy that Jessica and I didn't get married. I dodged a bullet there. It just proves that you can never truly know someone unless you've lived with them for a considerable amount of time, observing people in both their finest and worst states. I was now personally familiar with this element. I choose to hold off. Our lease, which was in my name, was set to expire in around 3 months. I reasoned it would be the ideal moment to approach. It would provide me time to organize so that I can optimize the impact of my efforts and have everything in order. Finding a new apartment that was within my means and near my place of employment took time. In addition, I needed to start packing boxes and ask some friends for assistance moving. I had a plan, but there was a lot to accomplish. Oh, and something else. I checked her phone approximately a month later. Ethan and Jessica did share a bed. To be honest, it merely made things simpler for me when I found out later. It confirmed that I should go. It eliminated any remaining uncertainty or desire to try to resolve the issue. In a sense, that was the last nail in the coffin. I've heard that once the prohibited element of the affair is removed, cheaters tend to lose interest. I suspect that the connection between Jessica and Ethan will not endure. It's really a fiction based on deceit and falsehoods. However, it is their issue, not mine. With the last plan set to go, I was beginning to gather myself. All right, so when the last month of the lease arrived, it was time to go. This has been months in the making, and I was prepared. I chose a day because I knew Jessica would be working late. She claimed to have had a large client dinner or something. But to be honest, I no longer gave a damn whether that was true. It just provided me with the necessary chance. James and the other pals I had previously lined up were the ones who knew the entire tale. They were more than happy to assist, of course. For weeks, they have been assuring me that they were there for me, that I deserved more, and that I needed to move on. Regardless, good men. I am fortunate to have them. Their encouragement helped me feel much better about what I had done. Early in the afternoon, we got together at the flat. Most of my belongings had already been put into boxes with clear labels, so I could identify them. We worked quickly and effectively. Like a well-oiled machine, these guys were. My belongings, which, to be honest, made up around 80% of the apartment, were put onto the truck. Electronics, cookware, clothing, tools, and furniture. Everything. I wanted to take as little as possible away from her. I wanted her to experience the void and emptiness I had been experiencing for months. One advantage of the new flat was that it was really closer to my place of employment. Although it was smaller, it was mine and clean. just a new beginning. It took us almost 4 hours to transfer everything. Considering how much I had, it was pretty quick. Before we departed, I recall taking a look around the flat. It was naked practically to the bone. Just a few pieces of furniture that Jessica had brought into the relationship, naked walls, and empty shelves. Despite its depressing appearance, it felt fantastic. An odd mixture of fury and melancholy was growing, being aware that this was what I was doing. However, there was also a feeling of freedom. Prior to my departure, I was at last free. I took one final action. I scribbled a brief, straightforward letter on a sheet of paper. Farewell. Enjoy yourself with Ethan. I contemplated for a long time what, if anything, I should write. I considered drafting a lengthy, irate letter in which I would express all of my hurt and annoyance. However, I ultimately concluded that less was more. This was the most succinct and direct statement. I put the message on the counter in the kitchen so she would notice it as soon as she entered. Although that sounds a little corny, it seemed appropriate. I even thought about saying something sarcastic, but I changed my mind. This was sufficient. I promised my pals I could take care of the rest, but they helped me unload some of the necessities at the new house. I wanted some alone time to adjust to my new environment and comprehend things. They departed after I thanked them once more for their assistance. I felt very fortunate to have them. The difficult part, ghosting, came next. My phone exploded when Jessica arrived home and discovered the letter, messages, texts, and calls on all the social networking sites you can think of. She was in a panic. Over the course of a few hours, she evidently went from furious accusations to heartfelt requests for forgiveness. I didn't reply when she even attempted to get in touch with me via common acquaintances, pleading with them to step in. Not once. Every call, message, and effort to get in touch with me was disregarded. This was the main part of my retaliation, if it can be called that at all. Total and absolute quiet. I wanted her to experience the same bewilderment, uncertainty, and powerlessness that I had when I learned about her affair. I haven't spoken to her at all in the 3 weeks since I moved out. In fact, I'm having fun picturing her terror. She must be freaking out. Update 2. The landlord called me a few days after I left. He was clearly perplexed and unsure of what was happening. He must have heard a narrative from Jessica, but he was interested in hearing my version. He called me on my cell phone. I was honest with him. I filled them in on everything, including the affair, Ethan, and my decision to leave since I couldn't live with a cheater. I informed him that the lease would not be renewed. The landlord was remarkably understanding, of course. I had been a nice renter for the short years he had known me. Made my rent payment on time, never created any issues. I believe he valued my candor. I also informed him that the security deposit would be lost. I didn't want my money back at all. I didn't want my money to help Jessica in any way. I instructed the landlord to conduct a comprehensive inspection of the apartment and determine whether she was entitled to any reimbursement. To be fair, I trusted him. I trusted him to make the right decision. After that, I heard something from the landlord that made me feel oddly satisfied. According to him, Jessica was unable to pay for the apartment on her own. Her family lived too far away to be of any assistance, and she had no roommate in mind. She was frantically looking for a new place to live because she was facing eviction. It was a direct result of what she did, of her treachery, and I won't tell lies, knowing that was comforting. To be honest, I don't feel sorry for Jessica, even though I know some people might think I'm being cruel. I threw myself into her. I made a decent companion. I was dependable. She threw everything away for some cheap thrill, and I was there to support her. She made her decisions. She now has to deal with the fallout. It has nothing to do with the cash, the apartment, or even the items I stole. It has to do with the idea behind it. It has to do with the hurt she gave me, the disdain she showed me. You cannot treat people like trash and expect to get away with it. That's what it's about. Having the best of both worlds is not possible. A loving, devoted spouse cannot be involved in a covert extramarital affair. The tour was conducted by the landlord. He got in touch with me to let me know that everything was okay and that my security deposit will be reimbursed. I was relieved when he informed me that he had given Jessica the notice of eviction. He was quite pleased with my handling of things. I told him I was glad to be moving on at last and thanked him once again. I was also advised to block her and move on. I thus did just that. The third update. A month has passed since the previous post, and Jessica has attempted to contact me once more after I blocked her. On a block number, she had phoned me. It immediately went to voicemail. As soon as I looked at it, I knew it was her. I returned the call. When Jessica responded, she started crying. She was sobbing, claiming she had nowhere to go and apologizing excessively. She sounded as though she had been sobbing for days. She sounded worn out, defeated. It was clear. She came to the realization that she could no longer deny the affair. The jig was up. She repeated herself. I apologize. I'm so sorry. Again and again. She made an effort to explain. Excuses. However, they lacked strength. Not very convincing. It simply occurred, she said. It wasn't what I intended. I couldn't understand. It was pitiful. She even made an effort to win back my affections by bringing up all of our enjoyable times together. Do you no longer give a damn about me? Her voice cracked as she asked. She was desperate and would do everything to persuade me to reconsider. She began to talk about how unsure she was of what was ahead. She said she had nowhere to go and had no idea what she was going to do. I spent some time listening to her cries. I wanted her to fully experience the consequences of her choices and the weight of her deeds. Then I laughed a little, without humor. It was a harsh, contemptuous chuckle, the sort that expresses incredulity and disdain. It's funny, I told you, Jessica. You lied to me and skulked around for weeks or even months, and now you want me to feel sorry for you? I took another moment to process what I had said. Your decisions were your own. What we had was ruined by you. You're now paying the price for it. I struck the last fatal blow. Ethan is with you, I said in a flat, impersonal voice. Join him on live. I hung up after that. I didn't wait for her to answer, to dispute, to beg. I abruptly stopped the conversation in the middle of a phrase. There was no turning back. If she tried at all, I immediately banned her on Facebook, Instagram, and all of my other social media accounts once I hung up. As completely as I had removed her physical presence from my apartment, I also removed her digital presence from my life. Even though I thought about removing old pictures and notes, I ultimately chose to save them, for the time being, as a reminder of my struggles and victories. A peculiar calmness swept over me as I sat back. I didn't experience a wave of joy or victory, only a calm, constant feeling of closure. I felt as though a load that I had been bearing for months had been removed, released at last. I began to rationalize my behavior and my thoughts. To me, not to anybody else. I wondered, I don't know where she'll go. I don't care, to be honest. She prepared her bed. She is able to lay in it. I became even more certain that she deserved all of the difficulties she faced. I saw it as a logical result of her decisions rather than an act of retaliation. She had ruined our relationship by lying to me and betraying me. Without me to lessen the blow, she had to confront the truth of it. I was aware of the suffering I had endured, the insomnia, the ongoing worry, and the sense of complete worthlessness. Although I wouldn't want it for anyone, I also wouldn't spare Jessica from the repercussions of her behavior. She deserves to be on the streets, if that's what happens. That was the last thing I had to say about it. It proves that I have no sympathy for her at all. Story 3. She insisted that I file for my husband's divorce so that her daughter could have him. Made my family think poorly of me. Then discovered that she was secretly having an affair with him. I'm 28 years old, and I've been married to Adam, 30 for 3 years. Like every marriage, we have experienced ups and downs, but I thought we were pretty steady. That is why the entire situation has taken me utterly by surprise. And now I'm wondering whether I was partly responsible for this catastrophe. I have this aunt. To put it mildly, she has always been quirky, so let's name her Natalie. She was the type of person who would do you a favor as a child and then hang it over your head forever. She was such an overbearing presence when I was a child, constantly gushing about how much she had done for everyone and how everyone knew her. It's just how she keeps everything under control. Although she has a reputation for being manipulative in the family, I never imagined that I would fall victim to her schemes, much less this one. I was younger, perhaps 18 or 19 years ago. Financially, I was going through an extremely difficult time. At the time, I had just moved out on my own, was making do with part-time jobs, and was attempting to work things out without my parents. Natalie supported me at that trying period in a way that I truly appreciated at the time. She gave me enough money to last me a few months while I recovered, but not much more than that. I gave her a lot of thanks and eventually gave her my entire repayment. For years, it looked to be over, and I believed that to be the case. I thought it was all over because she never addressed it or said I owed her anything. Fast forward to present. Additionally, Natalie has a daughter. We'll call her Grace. As a child, Grace and I were never close. She is a few years younger than me, but we have always been in separate social circles. In all honesty, we have never been very fond of one another. Because Natalie always puts her at the forefront of everything, she has always been the pampered, entitled sort, getting everything she wants. Family-oriented activities. The focus of attention is Grace. Holidays. The finest presents go to Grace. The highest accolade overall. Since it's simply the way Natalie works, I've learned to overlook it over the years. She treats her daughter as though she were a princess, and simply being among them should be enough to make the rest of us thankful. His birthday is approaching, Grace. She is turning 26 years old, and Natalie has been giving her daughter hints for weeks about how great this birthday has to be and how she wants to give her everything. Since Grace's birthday isn't particularly on my radar, I didn't give it much thought at first. When Natalie brought it up, I was kind and said something like, "Oh, that sounds great," but I wasn't really listening. One evening, Natalie unexpectedly phones and says she has to speak with me about something significant. When we met, I agreed to meet up with her because I assumed it was about Grace's birthday or some sort of family get-together. The strangest, most ridiculous request I have ever heard in my life came from Natalie. The only thing Grace truly wants for her birthday, she told me bluntly, is for me to leave my husband, Adam. I was taken aback, such as, why? Why would she think about it at all? Natalie continued by saying that Grace has been crushing on Adam for years. I was unaware of this, incidentally, and that she is certain he is her soulmate or something. Natalie claims that Grace has been lusting for him since their first date together, and that, as she approaches her 26th birthday, she believes this is her final opportunity to spend time with him. She honestly feels that Adam should be with her, and I am preventing them from being happy. I initially assumed this had to be a joke. I couldn't really be expected to leave my spouse as a birthday present for Natalie's daughter. However, as she spoke, I became aware that she was being very serious. She even began to mention the money. All those years ago, she gave me permission, claiming that I owed her money and that this was the ideal way to pay her back. According to Natalie, I would do this one thing for her kid if I genuinely appreciated her assisting me while I was having trouble. I was taken aback. What I heard was unbelievable. Naturally, I said no. I had no intention of ending my marriage because of a crazy demand from my conceited cousin. This is crazy, I told Natalie, that I owed her nothing and that I would never abandon Adam. For the money and any favor she believed she had done for me, I had reimbursed her, gave her no authority to make this demand. It was not well received by her. Natalie lost her temper and accused me of being conceited and unappreciative. She continued to talk about how Grace was deserving of happiness, how I was ruining everything by not seeing reason, and how she had sacrificed so much for me over the years. I was exhausted after that chat, but I was also sure that I had made the correct decision. I refused to be manipulated in that way by her. After that, I didn't give it much thought, but a few days later, things started to shift between Adam and me. When I asked him what was wrong, he just dismissed me, and he became colder and more aloof than normal. When he sat me down and announced his intention to leave, I thought he was under stress at work or something. He only stated that things were not going well, and that he believed it was time for us to split ways, without providing any further details. I was heartbroken. This was unexpected, and I was unaware of the sudden shift. I didn't find out what had truly transpired until I received a call from a mutual buddy. After our talk, Natalie reportedly told Adam everything behind my back, although she naturally embellished the details to make it seem like I was at blame. She informed Adam that I had been concealing secrets from him, that I didn't care about family, and that I was ungrateful for everything she had done for me. In order to manipulate the situation and make it seem as though I was the issue in our marriage, she even made up stories about how cold and distant I had been toward Adam. I've heard that she persuaded him that I wasn't being honest with him, which was sufficient to make him lose it. I'm currently attempting to put my life back together, after my spouse abandoned me due to my cunning aunt. A part of me questions whether our marriage was already troubled. This was only the final straw. Perhaps I missed some clues. I was not as good a wife as I believed myself to be. I'm angry, though, in another way. How could I have been harmed by Natalie? Because I didn't give in to her demands. How could she go behind my back and destroy my marriage? And why was Adam so quick to believe her? Before making such a significant choice, shouldn't he have had enough faith in me to at least discuss it with me? I don't know what to do right now since I am so upset and confused. My family is split on the issue. Some think I should have ignored it, while others think Natalie is acting inappropriately. In actuality, though, I no longer think this is solely about Natalie. I think there's more going on here, like Adam trying to find a way out and this being the perfect reason. I'm not sure whether I'm overreacting, but I can't get rid of the idea that I'm somehow to blame for this whole thing. Perhaps none of this would have occurred if I had treated Natalie differently and had paid more attention to Adam's demands. However, I feel as though I was forced into a situation where I would have lost, regardless of what I did. As a birthday present for her kid, I would agree to refuse my aunt's absurd demand that she leave my husband. And is what she told my spouse the reason he left me my fault? Right now, everything seems to be getting out of hand, and I'm not sure where to turn. So I just need some opinions on this. One update. Hello, everyone. My life essentially fell apart a few weeks ago, and I'm still attempting to come to terms with what transpired with my husband, Adam, and my aunt, Natalie. Processing the situation has been really difficult. I never imagined that I would submit an update, yet here I am, attempting to make sense of everything. I initially believed that Natalie's meddling was to blame. However, in light of all that has transpired subsequently, I've begun to question whether Adam and I were involved in anything deeper that I missed. I keep returning to the same question as I try to pull it all together. Was I simply blind to the fact that something was already broken? Adam didn't tell me anything when he informed me he was leaving. He recently told me that he believed it was time for us to split ways since things were not going well. There was no major altercation, just over. There was no blow-up. I was bewildered and heartbroken. I believed that we were safe, or as safe as any marriage that has its ups and downs. Everything seemed to have happened suddenly. I sat with my feelings and thoughts for a few days before deciding to contact Adam. I wasn't prepared to quit without at least talking about it. I texted him to ask if we could get together and discuss what had transpired. I was not immediately given a response, and I waited for a response over the following 3 days. Adam eventually responded with a text message stating that he had already made up his mind and was not interested in speaking. I was heartbroken. He seems to have closed the door on everything without hesitation, but it wasn't the worst of it. In addition, he told me that he was already seeing another person. And keep in mind that he had not even been gone from me for a whole month. My entire life crumbled when I discovered how quickly he had moved on. Did he date this person prior to our breakup? Did I fail to see him slipping away sooner because I was so blind? To be honest, I didn't want to hear the answers, so I didn't ask him any of these questions. It seemed as if all we had vanished in an instant. The spectrum of emotions I've been feeling, angry, betrayed, and confused, is hard to put into words. Everything is starting to fit together. How could he have moved on so fast? Why would he be so ready to part with what we've created? I can't stop thinking if I just disregarded the issues in our marriage, or if this new connection started before he left. I've been reviewing every exchange we've had over the past few months to see if I missed any warning signs, but nothing is particularly noteworthy. We argued as usual. It's nothing major, and I never thought things would fall apart so fast. Perhaps I missed the clues that he was retreating because I was too preoccupied with my own life. However, I also question whether Adam had been searching for an escape route all along, and Natalie's deceit was the perfect pretext for him. Regarding the entire matter, my family is split. I should have moved on and avoided the conflict with Natalie, according to some people. Others concur that Natalie was very inappropriate and that my decision to turn her down was the right one. However, none of this matters in the end. The harm has been done. Now that Adam is gone, I have to figure out how to start afresh. I haven't spoken to Natalie or Grace since everything happened, since he moved on with someone else. Now that they are totally removed from my life, I am relieved to be free of their poisonous presence. It still amazes me that Natalie could go behind my back, control Adam, and essentially destroy my marriage. However, I've come to the conclusion that trying to alter what happened is pointless. I have to move on because what is done is done. I will be completely honest. Adam may be seeing Grace, in my opinion. Given that Natalie wanted me to end my marriage so that Grace and Adam could be together, it would only make sense. So perhaps that's what's going on. Well, I'm not sure. I'd want to know. Regarding Adam, I'm not over it, even if I wish I could say that. It's likely that I will always adore him. However, I am aware that we are no longer married. Now that he has moved on, it is my turn to follow suit. I will need some time to recover from this. Additionally, there are days when the agony seems intolerable. However, I'm hoping that I'll finally overcome it. The second update. Hello, everyone. I want to start by saying thank you so much for your kind comments, support, and advice on my last post. It has meant the world to me that so many individuals are concerned about my predicament, something I never imagined. Before I start the post, I want to address a point that several of you brought up. To be honest, I was beginning to think what many others believed, that Adam was seeing Grace. The way things transpired made me think that there was something between them, and Natalie had really pushed me to leave Adam for Grace's sake. Why else would she ask for anything so absurd? Correct? If Adam and Grace weren't already in a love relationship, I couldn't understand why my aunt would ask me to leave my husband as a birthday present for her daughter. That's where things took a sudden and quite unsettling turn. Stephen, the husband of my Aunt Natalie and the father of Grace, sent me a note around 2 weeks ago. Since everything had gone wrong, I hadn't spoken to him in a while. But considering how crazy things had already gone, he pleaded with me to meet face to face because he had something essential to tell me. At first, I was dubious. After what had occurred to Natalie and Grace, I didn't want to be engaged in any more family turmoil, but I wanted to listen to Stephen because of the way he spoke. I thus chose to get together. Stephen appeared worn out when we first met, as though the entire world were pressing down on him. It was immediately clear to me that anything he had to say would not be simple. He started by expressing his regret for Natalie, Grace, and all that had transpired. I didn't know where he was going with this, but then he surprised me with a bomb. Adam didn't see Grace. He was in a relationship with Natalie. Indeed, my aunt, my manipulative toxicant, is 50 years old, Natalie. I couldn't speak. I attempted to understand what he was saying, but my mind went blank. I briefly believed I could have misheard him. However, Stephen continued, going into terrifying detail to explain everything. It seems that Adam and Natalie had been having an affair for some months. One weekend, after returning home early from a work trip, Stephen learned. He entered their home, went into his bedroom, and saw them sharing a bed. My aunt and my husband, Natalie and Adam, are in bed together. According to some of the texts and messages he discovered, it had been at least a few months, if not more, but Stephen claimed he was unsure exactly how long it had been going on. While Natalie was urging me to leave Adam for Grace, she had been having an affair with Adam behind my back. As she continued her covert affair with my husband, the whole birthday present foolishness served just as a diversion and a means of controlling me and everyone else. The earth seemed to have been torn out from under me. I didn't think I was ready for this at all. This was more than I could have imagined. Stephen's words were hard for me to grasp. Even though I had always known Natalie to be deceptive, I never thought she would act in this manner. And Adam, the man I had built a life with, the man I believed I knew, had he spent the whole time skulking about with my aunt? However, it didn't end there. Stephen continued by telling me that Natalie had made the decision to break up with him. Natalie was planning to leave Stephen on Grace's birthday, and it seemed like she and Adam were going to blow everything up. You read properly. Yes. On her daughter's birthday, she planned to destroy her own family so that she and my husband could go. All of this, which was only further manipulation, was unknown to Grace. Everyone thought Grace had affections for Adam, but in reality, she was sleeping with him because Natalie had exploited her daughter as a pawn in this sick, perverse game. I sat there in awe as Stephen informed me about this. I didn't know how to respond. All of my efforts had been directed into determining whether Adam was seeing Grace, but Natalie was actually my own and had deceived me in the most heinous manner. Stephen gave me his phone and showed me some of the texts he had found between Natalie and Adam after he had finished telling me everything. It hurt too much for me to stare at them for too long. The manner in which they discussed me, their goals, and their intention to start over. I became physically unwell once the dust cleared. I still find it hard to believe. This comes after weeks of attempting to come to terms with the possibility that Adam could feel something for Grace. The extent of this exceeded my expectations. Natalie. This whole event had been arranged by Natalie from the start. She had an affair with my husband behind everyone's backs while manipulating me and even her own spouse. I've been attempting to choose my next course of action, but I'm still in shock. I am currently attempting to come to terms with the reality that my husband left me for my aunt, whom I believe to be family, even though I believed he was dealing with a spouse who had left me for another woman. I'm not sure if they're still dating or if their little scheme failed when Stephen discovered them. Right now, a part of me doesn't even give a damn. Whatever happens with them, the harm has already been done to me, and what is done is done. Right now, I am simply trying to get by, although I wish I could say there's a bright side. For now, I'm just trying to figure out how to move on after all that has occurred, but I'll keep you all informed if anything changes. Once again, I appreciate all of your help. In this horror, it has become a lifeline. The third update. Hi everyone. A few things have happened since the last update, which was quite some time ago. Hopefully, this is the last update on the nightmare I've been going through in the interim. Although the result of my confrontation with Adam was not what I had hoped for, it did provide me with some closure. I believe I always knew I would have to face him head on at some point. I simply didn't think it would be that dramatic, or that when he realized Natalie wasn't who he believed her to be, he would beg me to take him back. It's hard to describe how I felt before that, but I knew that I couldn't go on with my life if I didn't face Adam. I had to speak out and tell him the full truth. No more second-guessing or fleeing. I eventually got in touch with him and told him that we needed to get together and discuss. We met at a neutral park where I believed I could control my feelings. I didn't want the altercation to take place in our house, which held a lot of memories, both happy and sad. After several days, I eventually made it to the point where I spotted him. It was strange. I didn't care enough to ask him what had occurred or why he looked so exhausted, even though it seemed like he hadn't slept in days. I went right to the point. I claimed to be an expert on everything. As I sat at home, loving and trusting him, I told him that I was aware of Natalie and that she was the lady he had been skulking around with. His expression was not as shocked as when someone is apprehended. Rather, it was a disgrace. It took him some time to be able to look me in the eyes. I was anticipating explanations or an effort at cover-up, so I was startled when he did not defend himself. Instead, he acknowledged it with a gentle nod. He attested to everything. It was a bit of an anticlimax. He made the pitiful admission that he had damaged our marriage by having an affair, but there was no great yelling or explosion. I wanted to say so many things. When the moment came, all I could say was why I needed to know what was wrong with me, or with us, even though I had practiced this for hours in my mind, that he would be unfaithful to me in this way. Adam started talking about how our marriage had become regular, and that he was no longer happy. He claimed that Natalie had given him a sense of life after he had been stagnant. It felt like a stomach punch. It seemed unbelievable to me that he was using it as a justification, as though ruining our lives was excused by his boredom. I was appalled as I stood there. I informed him right away that he had lost everything because of his selfishness. He could have handled feeling stuck in so many more effective ways. We could have talked, taken a break, and sought out therapy. However, he decided to deceive me, cheat on me, and ruin our marriage. I told him at that point. I informed him that I was divorcing him. A weird sensation of power washed over me as I spoke it clearly, and without hesitation. I was in control for the first time. I was done begging him to remain, and I wasn't going to forgive him for his bad choices. The unexpected happened at that moment. Adam, who had been so indifferent to the issue up until this point, burst into tears. He had never looked like this to me. In fact, he began to cry. I'm not referring to a few tears here. He was crying. Grabbing my hands, he pleaded with me not to forward with the divorce. He said that Natalie was not who he believed her to be, and that everything had broken apart between them. And now he understood that he had committed the worst error of his life. He acknowledged that her actual personality surfaced as the excitement of their romance subsided. She seems to be domineering and manipulative. She picks conflicts all the time. and even threatens to reveal their affair if he doesn't do things her way. He stated he regretted everything since she had made his life a living nightmare. It was strange to witness this man, who had before given the impression that nothing could change him, sob in front of me. He told me he couldn't believe he had sacrificed our life together for someone like Natalie, and that he felt lost without me. He said that he would stop at nothing to make amends and that he still loved me. But in all honesty, I felt nothing. I didn't feel sorry for him. No sympathy for him because of what Natalie did, no desire to take him back. All I felt was numbness. There was no longer any trust. It was broken by him, and no amount of tears or regrets could restore it. It was too late, I informed him. I informed him that I was not interested in trying to mend the harm to our marriage, and that there was no way to reverse what he had done. That's when he knew I was serious, I believe. There was no chance of reconciliation, and I was not going to forgive. He persisted in pleading with me, and tried to persuade me that he was prepared to go to any lengths to resolve this. However, I had already decided. I informed him that we no longer had a future together, that I deserved more, and that I was going to go on with my life. I believe that a part of me was waiting for him to get defensive or to lash out, as he had done when we had a fight in the past, to become angry. However, that didn't occur. Rather, when he realized he had lost me forever, he simply broke down even more. Then I went out. I left without turning around. I feel as though a great burden has been removed off my shoulders, because I have already filed for divorce. It hasn't been simple, mind you. Even though I know I made the correct choice, there are still moments when I feel so betrayed and heartbroken that it is hard for me to breathe. I am aware that this is what I must do in order to improve myself and start a new life. I've heard that Natalie is upset with Adam for attempting to reunite with me. It seems that their relationship soured shortly after the truth was revealed, and they are currently both unhappy. Although I would never wish such devastation on anybody, Adam is paying the price for his decisions, and I am no longer concerned about it. What transpires between them doesn't matter to me. Simply said, I'm relieved to be free of it. Natalie is no longer a part of my life. There is no room for forgiveness, no possibility of reconciliation. I have no room in my heart for those who deceive me in such a way. Now that she is gone, I am concentrating on myself. Although this entire process has been the most difficult thing I have ever faced, I have gained a great deal of self-awareness. I've come to the realization that I don't need someone who treats me disrespectfully, tells falsehoods, and cheats on me. I will never again accept anything less than a spouse that cherishes me in our relationship because I deserve it. That's all then. I'm going about my life now, one step at a time. Healing will take time, but I am certain that I am headed in the right direction. I am grateful to everyone who helped and encouraged me along my journey. You'll never understand how much it meant. At last, I am prepared to put this drama behind me and go on with my life.